The CEO was about to marry the crude heiress his father had arranged for him. But just as he lifted the bridal veil, he was shocked to discover that the bride was a stunning beauty. They stared at each other's unfamiliar faces, frozen in place. It was only then that the CEO recalled he had picked up the wrong bride at the hotel. Meanwhile, the woman looked confused. When she turned and saw the photo on the wall, she was stunned to realize she had married the wrong groom. It was completely absurd. The reason such an awkward mistake happened was mainly because both brides were getting married at the same hotel and coincidentally wore the same dress. To make it even more complicated, the wedding rooms were right next to each other on the same floor. So during the ceremony, this mix-up occurred. The woman's intended groom was mentally challenged, but her mother, tempted by a $200,000 dowry, decided on her own to marry her off to a man she had never met. The CEO's arranged date was a rude and uncultured heiress. Naturally, the CEO refused to marry her, but he didn't dare disobey his father, so he reluctantly agreed. Thus, the two brides got married on the same day, in the same hotel, wearing identical dresses. Even the simple-minded groom was shocked when he came to pick up the bride. Due to a server's misdirection, he mistakenly took the CEO's bride. Meanwhile, the CEO also came to pick up his bride. When a relative nearby mentioned that the groom was handsome, the woman immediately thought of the dull man and criticized their taste in men. What she didn't know was that the handsome CEO was standing right in front of her. The CEO, on the other hand, remembered the rude behavior of his supposed bride and instantly turned cold toward her, reluctantly taking her away. But he didn't realize this was just the beginning of their story. On the way, the CEO started chatting with the woman and noticed that her tone of voice had completely changed. She was no longer vulgar and aggressive, but had become gentle and soft-spoken. But the CEO didn't think much of it, assuming she was just pretending. Meanwhile, the dull man also sensed that something was off. His bride used to be very gentle, so why was she suddenly so irritable today? But he didn't dwell on it too much and carried his bride home. At this point, the bad woman was sweating from the heat, completely unaware that she had married a dull man. The dull man was still celebrating with his friends when his friends suggested going to see the bride. Not wanting to drink, the dull man agreed. Everyone was delighted to hear this, so they brought him to the room. Upon seeing the bride in the room, the group, right in front of the dull man, started taking advantage of the bad woman. But the wronged woman suddenly snapped and kicked everyone out of the room. Even the dull man was frightened and wondered why his bride was no longer gentle. Furious, the bad woman dragged the dull man into the room and scolded him. But when she heard that he didn't want to drink and so allowed his friends to harass her, she couldn't hold back any longer. She immediately lifted her bridal veil. The two stared into each other's eyes and were completely stunned. The woman fearfully asked the dull man who he was. Just as the man was about to call in his parents, she quickly stopped him. So the dull man told her everything that had happened. Only then did the woman realize that she got into the wrong car and married the wrong person. If this got out, her reputation would be ruined. And how could she ever be with the handsome CEO? Seeing her distress, the dull man began to comfort her. Unexpectedly, sparks of love began to fly between them during their talk. But since they weren't truly married, the woman still wanted to return to the CEO. Meanwhile, the other woman was crying bitterly over her unfortunate life. At that moment, the CEO suddenly entered the room. Just as the woman was panicking and unsure what to do, the CEO suddenly lifted her bridal veil. Both of them were instantly stunned. They both asked each other, "Who are you?" But their voices were too loud and were heard by both sets of parents in the living room. The bad woman's father came forward to ask what was going on. Luckily, the man managed to brush it off just in time. While the two were thinking of how to cover things up, the door knocked again. The bad woman's father asked the couple to come out and serve tea to the elders. Helpless, the CEO had to agree for now, planning to find a way to let the woman slip away later. But first, they had to get the elders to leave. Soon, the CEO came up with an idea. Strange sounds started coming from the room. The elders outside instantly understood what was going on. The scene became extremely awkward. Everyone tactfully left the area, but the CEO's father was still standing outside. Realizing this, the woman couldn't help but worry. worry. Seeing the woman's lost and helpless expression, the CEO immediately said that he would find a way to help her leave. After spending this time together, the CEO realized he had fallen in love with the woman, but he couldn't bear to ruin her reputation. So they waited until midnight, and when they saw no one was outside, the CEO took the woman and quietly led her out. Meanwhile, the dull man was also sneaking out with the bad woman. The two couples opened their doors at the same time. At that moment, they locked eyes. Each had something they wanted to say to the other, but they both blurted out at the same time, "Your wife is at my house." Right after that, both women stepped out. The scene was incredibly awkward, but after they swapped brides, all four of them looked noticeably disappointed. Even the dull man and the woman were lying in the same bed with different dreams. He was actually thinking about the bad woman.